My name is Renee Adair Castillo. I am 44 years old. I'm going to tell you about a Saturday afternoon in May in a banquet room at a golf club in Cherry Creek, Denver, where a woman I hadn't spoken to in 11 years stood up at my daughter's graduation reception, tapped a butter knife against a champagne glass, and told 70 people that she was just so relieved Maya turned out fine, considering everything she went through with her mother. I was sitting 2 tables away. I had a manila envelope in my purse. I'd been carrying it on and off for 11 years. My daughter Maya was sitting beside me. She was 18 years old, in a pale blue dress, with her cap still tucked under her chair, and I watched her face go very still, the particular stillness of someone doing math they don't want to be doing. I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The room was already quiet, the way rooms get quiet when someone says something that lands wrong, and everyone feels it before they understand it. I said, "Marilyn, I think there's something everyone here should actually see." And I opened the envelope. Let me take you back to the beginning, because the beginning is the only way any of this makes sense. Before I take you there, if stories like this one matter to you, please like and subscribe. And in the comments, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I read everyone. Now, back to the beginning. I grew up in Pueblo, Colorado, the daughter of a school cafeteria worker and a man who drove a delivery route for a beverage distributor. We lived in a small rental house on the south side of town, the kind with a chain-link fence and a porch light that buzzed. My parents didn't have much, but they were steady. My father used to say, "Steady beats fancy every single time, Renee." Remember that. I didn't fully understand what he meant until much later. I moved to Denver at 19, got a job as a receptionist at a small family law firm, and within 2 years, I'd worked my way up to paralegal. I was good at it, methodical, careful, the kind of person who reads every page of a document twice. I made $28,000 a year, which felt like a fortune to me at the time, and I rented a 1-bedroom apartment off Colfax Avenue with a radiator that clanked all winter. I met Daniel Whitcomb when I was 26. He came into the firm as a client, a minor business dispute, nothing dramatic. And he was charming in the specific way that people who have never had to try very hard at anything are charming. Easy. Unhurried. He laughed at things before they were funny, just to make you feel like you'd said something good. His family had money. Not the kind of money you see, old Denver money. 3 generations of a construction and land development business. A house in Cherry Creek with a circular driveway. And a housekeeper named Inez, who'd worked for them for 20 years. Daniel's mother, Marilyn Whitcomb, ran that house the way some people run a small country. I want to be precise about Marilyn, because she is not a cartoon, and this story doesn't work if you think of her as one. Marilyn Whitcomb was, by every account I ever heard, a devoted mother. She had given up a career. She'd been a buyer for a department store chain, by all accounts good at it, to raise Daniel and his two sisters. And she had built her entire identity around the idea that the Whitcomb family was, and would always be, respectable. Not rich, in her telling. Respectable. The distinction mattered to her enormously. Daniel and I got married when I was 28. Marilyn planned most of the wedding herself, including seating charts that placed my parents at a table near the kitchen door. So they'd be close to the restrooms, dear. Your mother mentioned her knees. A detail my mother never mentioned to anyone, ever, in her life. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself a lot of things didn't matter for about 6 years. Maya was born when I was 30. For the first few years, things were not perfect, but manageable. Daniel worked at the family company. I'd cut back to part-time at the firm. We lived in a townhouse Daniel's parents had bought as an investment, which everyone understood to mean we lived there for free, which everyone also understood came with certain expectations about how often we'd be at Marilyn's house for dinner. 3 times a week, usually. Sometimes 4. I noticed things during those years. Small things. The way Marilyn would correct how I dressed Maya. She's a Whitcomb, Renee, not a flea market find. About a $40 dress from Target that Maya loved because it had pockets. The way Daniel would go quiet at his mother's table in a way he never did at ours. The way decisions about Maya's school, Maya's pediatrician, even Maya's middle name, Adair, my grandmother's name, which Marilyn called unusual every single time she said it for 5 years, were never quite settled until Marilyn had weighed in. I noticed, but I didn't act on it because nothing had happened yet. Not really. Then when Maya was 5, something happened. I found out from a mutual friend at a birthday party, not from Daniel, that Daniel had been seeing someone else for almost a year. A woman named Brooke, the daughter of one of Marilyn's closest friends from the country club. I confronted Daniel that night. He didn't deny it. He cried, actually. Daniel cried more in that conversation than I'd seen him cry in 6 years of marriage. And he said he wanted to figure things out. I told him I needed time. I moved, with Maya, into my sister's spare room in Aurora for what I thought would be a few weeks, while we sorted things out like adults. Here is where the story most people expect ends, and where this one actually begins. If you've ever had people in your life rewrite what happened to them right in front of you, and smile while they did it, I want you to drop a comment below and tell me how long you let it go on before you said something. I read every one of them. Now, back to that spring. Within 3 weeks, Daniel filed for divorce. Within 5 weeks, his attorney paid for, I learned later, entirely by Marilyn, filed for an emergency custody hearing, requesting that Maya be placed primarily, with Daniel given concerns about the mother's stability during this transitional period. Concerns about my stability. The concerns turned out to be an affidavit, signed by Marilyn Whitcomb, stating that I had a history of drinking that the family had quietly managed for years, and that I had become emotionally erratic and unpredictable since separating from Daniel. I want to tell you exactly what this was based on. 2 years earlier, at Marilyn's 60th birthday party, I had 4 glasses of champagne over the course of 6 hours. I remember counting afterward because I went back through every photo from that night, trying to understand what version of me Marilyn was describing. And at the end of the night, I cried in the bathroom for about 10 minutes because my father had just been diagnosed with the early stages of Parkinson's, and I hadn't told anyone yet except Daniel. Daniel told his mother. That was the entire incident. 4 glasses of champagne over 6 hours, and 10 minutes of grief in a bathroom at a party 2 years before any of this started. That was the foundation of a history of drinking the family had quietly managed for years. I lost temporary custody for 14 months. I want to say that sentence again, slower, because I've never been able to say it quickly, even now. I lost temporary custody of my 5-year-old daughter for 14 months, based on an affidavit built almost entirely out of 1 bathroom and 4 glasses of champagne, written by a woman who had spent 6 years correcting how I dressed her granddaughter. During those 14 months, I had supervised visitation, 2 hours twice a week in a beige room with a one-way mirror and a box of toys that smelled like industrial cleaner. Maya would ask me every single visit, "Are you coming home soon, Mommy?" And I would say, "Soon, baby. I'm working on it," because I didn't know what else a 5-year-old could carry. I want to tell you what I did during those 14 months, because this is the part of the story that matters most. I worked. I kept my job at the firm. I couldn't afford not to. And every single day after work, I went to the law library at the University of Denver because I couldn't afford a second attorney on top of the one I already had, and I needed to understand, in detail, exactly what was happening to me. I learned how custody evaluations work. I learned what a guardian ad litem does. I learned the difference between an affidavit and evidence, and I learned slowly, painfully, 1 library night at a time, that an affidavit full of feelings is not the same thing as a fact, and that facts, when you can produce them, still mean something in a courtroom, even when the person across from you has more money than you'll ever have. I requested my own medical and employment records going back 10 years. Spotless. I paid $420 out of pocket for an independent substance evaluation. A full panel hair follicle, the works, that came back completely clean because there was nothing to find. I got character statements from my employer of 11 years, from Maya's preschool teacher, from my own mother. And this one mattered more than any other, from Inez, the Whitcomb family's housekeeper of 20 years, who quietly, on her own, gave a statement describing what she had actually observed in that house for over a decade. have to do that. It cost her something. She stopped being invited to family events after that. I found out later, though Marilyn never fired her, because firing her would have raised questions Marilyn didn't want asked. The custody evaluator's report came back 51 pages long. I have read it more times than I can count. The conclusion was direct. There was no evidence supporting the claims in Marilyn Whitcomb's affidavit, and the evaluator noted, in language about as sharp as evaluators ever use, that the affidavit appeared to originate from family conflict rather than documented concern for the child's welfare. 14 months after it started, I got Maya back. Primary custody. Daniel got alternating weekends and one weeknight dinner. If you're watching this and you're in the middle of something like this right now, something where the truth feels too slow and the other side feels too loud, only 3% of people who watch a video like this actually subscribe. If this story is helping you feel less alone in it, that's the only reason to tap that button. Okay, let's keep going. I want to talk about the years after, because they're the quiet part, and the quiet part is the part that built everything. I was 32 when I got Maya back. I was a single mother, a paralegal making $36,000 a year, with about $11,000 in legal debt I'd taken on for my portion of the custody fight. A fraction of what Marilyn had spent, but more than I had. I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Lakewood with water stains on the bathroom ceiling that I never had the money to ask the landlord to fix properly. So I just learned which bucket to put under it when it rained. And about 4 months after I got Maya back, I decided to apply to law school. Night program, University of Denver, 4 years part-time while working full-time and raising a 5-year-old alone. People ask me sometimes if that decision came from anger. It didn't, not really, or not only. It came from something closer to what my father used to say. Steady beats fancy. I had just spent 14 months watching what happens to a person who doesn't have the language of the system fighting against them. I didn't want to be that person again. And I didn't want Maya to grow up watching her mother be that person, either. 4 years. Tuesday and Thursday nights, plus every other Saturday morning. I studied at the kitchen table after Maya went to sleep, usually from 9 to midnight, 4 nights a week, for 4 years. I calculated it once out of curiosity, the way I calculate everything, and it came to just over 3,000 hours. I want to tell you about one person, because without her, none of this would have been possible. Her name was Alina Voss. She was a professor at the law school, family law and evidence, in her late 60s by the time I had her. Silver hair always pulled back in the same low knot, reading glasses on a beaded chain she'd made herself. She'd noticed, in my first semester, that I was the only student in the night program with a 5-year-old, because I'd had to bring Maya to one evening class when my sitter canceled, and Maya had sat quietly in the back row coloring for 2.5 hours. After class, Professor Voss came over, crouched down to Maya's level, and said, "What did you draw?" Maya showed her a horse, mostly purple. Professor Voss said, "That's the best horse I've seen all year." And then she looked up at me and said, "If this happens again, there's a study room down the hall with a couch. Use it. Nobody needs to know." It happened again, more than once. And every time, Professor Voss made sure nobody said anything about it. In my second year, she became my mentor formally. She supervised my work in the family law clinic, where I represented, under supervision, 3 mothers in custody disputes who couldn't afford private attorneys. In my third year, she wrote my recommendation for a judicial clerkship I didn't get. And then, without telling me, wrote a second one for a different position I did get, at a firm that specialized in family law. Professor Voss died of pancreatic cancer 8 months before I took the bar exam. At her memorial service, I learned that she had quietly waived clinic hours requirements for at least 6 other students over the years, all of them parents, all of them juggling something most of their classmates weren't. She never told any of us about the others. We all thought we were the exception. I passed the bar on my first attempt at 36. I specialize now in family law. Specifically, and I want you to sit with this for a second, I specialize in representing parents facing custody challenges built on unsubstantiated affidavits. I've represented 41 clients in 8 years. 36 of them kept primary custody. Daniel and I co-parented, more or less functionally, for the next several years. Not warmly, but functionally. He paid support on time. He showed up for school events sometimes. Marilyn, for her part, never apologized, never acknowledged the custody evaluation, and never, as far as I know, told a single person in her social circle the actual story of what happened. What she told people, I learned this slowly, over years, the way you learn most things about people who talk about you when you're not in the room, was a softened version. That there had been a difficult period, that I had needed some time to get back on my feet, that Daniel had stepped up during that time, for Maya's sake. I let it go. For years, I let it go. Maya was happy, mostly. She had 2 homes that both, eventually, felt safe. I had a career I was proud of. I told myself the actual truth didn't need an audience. It had already done its work in the only room that mattered, the courtroom, 11 years ago. Then came the graduation. Maya got into the University of Colorado Boulder on a partial academic scholarship to study. And I want you to notice this, because I noticed it the moment she told me pre-law. She wants to do family law. She's 18. She doesn't fully know yet what that means to me. Daniel asked if his family could host the reception after the ceremony at the golf club in Cherry Creek for Maya, since she's close with that side of the family too. I said yes. Maya is close with that side of the family, with Daniel's sisters, with her cousins. I wasn't going to take that away from her over something that happened when she was 5 years old and doesn't fully remember. I did not expect Marilyn to stand up. The reception was going fine. 70 people, round tables, a slideshow of Maya's childhood photos playing on a screen near the bar. I was seated with my parents, my sister, and Maya. Daniel was 2 tables over with his current wife, not Brooke. That ended within 2 years, but a woman named Christine, who has, for what it's worth, always been kind to Maya and to me. Marilyn stood up during the toasts. She's 73 now. She tapped her glass, the room quieted, and she said the kind of thing people say at these events. How proud she was, how Maya had grown into such a remarkable young woman, how the whole family had always supported her. And then she said it. The line about how relieved she was that Maya turned out fine, considering everything she went through with her mother. I watched 70 people not quite know what to do with that sentence. Most of them didn't know the history. A few Daniel's sisters, I could see it on their faces, knew exactly what she meant and looked instantly, sharply uncomfortable. And Maya, beside me, 18 years old, in a pale blue dress, went very still. I stood up. I want to describe what that felt like, because it's the only part of this story where I was, for 1 second, genuinely unsure what I was about to do. 11 years of letting it go. 11 years of it doesn't need an audience. And then my daughter, who is about to spend the next 4 years studying the exact field that nearly took her from me, sitting next to me, doing the math on a sentence that wasn't true. I said, Marilyn, I think there's something everyone here should actually see. I opened the envelope. It wasn't a surprise to me that I had it. I've carried a copy of the final custody order and the evaluator's summary in my bag for years. Ever since the first time, years ago, Marilyn made a smaller version of this same comment at a different family event. And I'd promised myself I'd never again be in a room where that story got told without the actual paper in reach. I didn't read the whole 51 pages. I didn't need to. I read one paragraph, the conclusion, in a calm, level voice, the same voice I use in court when I'm reading a finding into the record. It stated, in the language of the court, that the allegations against me had been investigated and found to be without basis, that they appeared to stem from family conflict rather than the child's welfare, and that primary custody was awarded to me without restriction. Then I said, I've never told most of you this story because I didn't think it needed telling. But Marilyn just told a different one in front of my daughter, and I'm not going to sit here and let that be the version that stands. I folded the paper. I sat back down. The room was very quiet. Somewhere near the bar, a glass clinked against another glass, the only sound for what felt like a long time, though it was probably 4 or 5 seconds. Daniel stood up. I want to tell you what he did, because it surprised me. He walked over, not to me, to his mother, and he said quietly, but not so quietly that the tables nearest us couldn't hear, Mom, sit down. She's right, and you know she's right, And today is not about any of this. Marilyn sat down. She did not say anything else for the rest of the reception. I've been told since, by Daniel's sister, that it's the first time in anyone's memory that Marilyn Whitcomb has been told to sit down by her own son in front of other people, and complied. Maya, beside me, didn't say anything for a minute. Then she put her head on my shoulder, 18 years old, taller than me by 2 inches, in her cap and gown with her hair still done from the ceremony. And she said, "I didn't know it was that bad, Mom." "I know," I said. "It wasn't something I wanted you carrying around at 5, or at 10, or really ever, if I could have helped it." "Why now?" she asked. "Because she said it in front of you," I said. "And you're old enough now to know which version is true. I'd rather you know it from me, calmly, with the actual paper, than spend the next however many years hearing pieces of the wrong one." Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want to read it, the whole thing, not today, but sometime." "Okay," I said, "when you're ready. I want to tell you what happened in the weeks after, because it's not dramatic, and that's sort of the point." Daniel called me 2 days later and apologized, not for the divorce, not even really for the custody fight, which he's apologized for before, in pieces, over the years, but specifically for never having told his mother, clearly and directly, years ago, to stop. "I let her keep telling it," he said, "because it was easier than the fight it would have taken to make her stop. I'm sorry it took her saying it to Maya's face for me to finally do it." I told him I appreciated that. I meant it. Marilyn has not called. I don't expect her to. I'm told again, through Daniel's sister, who has become, unexpectedly, something like a friend to me over the years, that Marilyn has told a few people a much shorter version now. There were some difficult years. It's all in the past. No mention of an affidavit. No mention of 14 months. Just 4 words doing the work that 51 pages of evidence once had to do. Fighting against a story that never should have existed in the first place. I don't need her to apologize to me. I've made my peace with that slowly, over a long time. What I needed, what I think I'd been carrying that envelope around for all those years, without fully admitting it to myself, was for the story to stop circulating in front of my daughter as if it were true. It has. That's enough. Maya leaves for Boulder in August. She's planning to take Professor Voss's old family law and evidence textbook with her. I gave it to her, the one with Aliner's handwriting in the margins, the one that sat on my kitchen table for 4 years of Tuesday and Thursday nights. Maya doesn't remember Aliner, but she's read the margin notes, and she told me a few weeks ago, "Whoever wrote these really believed in you." She did, long before I believed in myself. Even at 44, with a law degree and a career built on exactly this kind of fight, I'm still learning things about my own family and about myself. So here's where I've landed, looking back on all of it. 1. the story someone tells about you in a room you're not in is not the same as the truth. But if you're never in the room, it can quietly become the only version anyone hears. 2, evidence isn't cold. It's just patience that's been written down. 3, the people who repeat a comfortable lie for years usually aren't doing it out of cruelty. They're doing it because the truth would cost them something they've decided they're not willing to pay. 4, you can forgive someone for what they did without ever needing them to admit they did it. Those are 2 different things, and only one of them is actually about you. 5, sometimes the person who believes in you longest isn't the one who's there at the end. It's the one whose handwriting you find in the margins years later when you finally need it. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me about the Alina in your life, the one who believed in you when it cost them something to do it. I read everyone.